Hello out there, this is the Irate Veteran coming at you with another video. And if you look at the title that I have here, is the VA trying to kill us veterans? Well, sometimes I really have to wonder. In this video, I'm going to actually analyze a claim denial and then give my suggestions about how a veteran would move forward with dealing with that denial. But I also want to highlight at the beginning of this video about veteran suicide. I want to talk a little bit about that. The VA reports, like 18 veterans a day commit suicide, right? But there are some studies out there, at least a study, that shows, it's like 44 veterans a day. What people maybe don't realize is how the VA counts veteran suicide is by how the states report it. And let's say, for example, a veteran dies of a drug overdose. Those are not counted in veteran suicide numbers because no one knows for sure, was it accidental or was it a suicide? And there's other types of deaths, again, that aren't counted in the VA number. So if those accidental deaths, supposedly from overdoses, were counted, it could be as high as 44 veterans a day. So the problem is really much worse than the Veterans Administration reports. So, so we're going to talk a little bit about veteran suicide and, how maybe we can prevent some of those suicides. Let me read my little disclaimer here. The information presented in this video is not intended to be legal or medical advice. I am not a lawyer, medical professional, or claims agent. The information is per my personal knowledge and direct experience in directly advising thousands of veterans with veteran-to-veteran advice on their claims for VA disability compensation. I no longer provide that one-on-one, in-depth veteran-to-veteran advice. However, if you have questions, call me. I answer my phone. I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'm not going to review any evidence. Simply put, this video just represents my personal opinion. Now that that's out of the way, VA incompetence. Let me say something about that. Of the thousands of claims that I've reviewed from veterans and directly looked at their evidence, 90% of those claims involve some kind of error. Either they denied it and they shouldn't have, or they have the wrong effective date, or they have the wrong rating. But 90% of the claims they look at have something wrong with them. So, what we're going to talk about is, okay, how do we address those problems, right? Well, we have to educate ourselves. We need to know when the VA is wrong, and we must know what to do if they are wrong. And one of the big things we have to do is hold VA accountable. And that's not easy. However, you have access to your congressmen and your senators in your state. And anytime you're having problems with the Veterans Administration, you should report these things. At least the more complaints that come into your congresspeople's office or your senator's offices, maybe that can eventually put some pressure on the Veterans Administration to do their jobs right. Also, you can ask for in-person hearings with some types of claims, and you can bring your complaints directly to the VA. So let's move on to talk about Paul Shuping. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. But you can look at him. He was a young sailor. And then later in life, like all of us, we age. Let me tell you a little about Paul. Let me just read this to you. Paul was 63 with multiple healthcare concerns and was collecting VA disability at a less than full rate. He received good care for his healthcare needs at his local VA healthcare facility, and he found purpose in helping veterans match with service dogs. One of his close friends said he seemed like he was thriving. All outward appearances were of a disabled veteran who was doing well. Then a VA decision notification denying full disability came in the mail. Then he was dead. He was found in his car just days after the denial of benefits in a VA parking lot with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Listen, people, I'd bet really good money that he was considered at low risk for suicide because he was doing well, and that the VA decision is probably riddled with errors. I don't know that for sure, but again, my experience is 90% of the time, the VA has it wrong. I really don't have any doubt that they were likely wrong in this case. There are some things that I wish VA would do to mitigate some of the problems, at least with veterans and their claims, especially veterans who are at risk for suicide. One of the things I think they can do is establish a flagging system so that anytime a VA decision maker, whether that's a healthcare decision maker or a disability decision maker, claim decision maker, that they'll know they're dealing with a veteran who is service connected for a service related condition. And once they know that they're dealing with a veteran like that, for whatever decision they're going to make, if it's going to be a negative decision, well, then that decision needs to be reviewed at the management level to ensure that that denial of whatever benefit it is definitely the right decision to make. And as I've already said, 90% of the time, at least with claims, the VA's made the wrong decision. So hopefully, if a management level review on a flagged record would prevent a erroneous denial going out to a veteran. And let's just say the claim is going to remain denied. Well, then I think that VBA or VHA should coordinate with one of their mental health professionals and come up with a plan, not just throw the denial at the veteran, but let him know, okay, here's the steps you can take to address the denial and hopefully move forward on a positive foot. At least maybe it'll soften the impact of that denial. But here's some things we can do. And if you would, send these suggestions that I just have here to your congressmen and your senators. I've already done that. I've sent it to, the president. I've sent it to my senator and my congressman. I've sent it to every single member on the Veteran Affairs committees in the House and the Senate. No one's ever answered any of my recommendations. I've made these recommendations for years. I continue to make them. Maybe one day, finally, we can stop deaths like with Paul. Paul would likely be here today, and many other veterans, if the VA just got the decision right. So let's move on to analyzing our claim denials. Actually, this is for a set of claims that I submitted. Right? But any veteran who wants me to analyze their claim, right, just give me a call, send me an email, and we will work something out. And I will make a video to discuss how to, your actual denial and how to overcome it. So here is the regulation that really says everything that needs to be said about how VA should be processing claims. And let me just read this highlighted part here, because these are the real important parts. Service connection must be considered on the basis of all pertinent medical and lay evidence. Determinations will be based on a review of the entire evidence of record. In other words, the VA is supposed to take all the medical evidence, right, including lay evidence, and any other evidence in the record to evaluate your claim. Here's the problem. The VA mostly doesn't do that. I don't know why, but they just don't. But they're supposed to. Now, by the way, when it says the evidence, the entire evidence of record, that means in reference to the claim you're filing, right? So if you're filing like a foot claim, that means any evidence they have related to your feet, they have to evaluate that evidence to process your claim. They don't have to look at like problems with your knees or your back, right? Because that's not relevant to the claim you filed. When they say the entire evidence of record, it only means in reference to the claim you're filing. But anyway, this is like the regulation. Let's listen to something about what the VA secretary has recently said about claims. It's pretty interesting.
Since we came in 6 months ago, the backlog was at 260,000, and I'm standing here today telling you we're almost at 160,000. That's 35% drop. Almost 100,000 backlogs have been cleared in just a little under 6 months. That's some impressive stuff that says that we at the VA care about veterans and making sure you get the benefits you deserve and making it easier to get them while we're there.
It's hilarious, right? And why do I think it's hilarious? What you're going to see when I look at these claims is it appears how they've got that backlog gone, worked down, right? Is that they receive the claim, they get all that, everything together to process the claim, and then they just deny it without bothering to look at any of the evidence. In other words, they can quickly just deny the claim without taking any effort to process it. Yeah, it gets the backlog down really quickly. Of course, it screws the veteran, right? So, and I know some people say, oh, they're not doing that. Okay, well, let's look at the claims that I filed. Filed 4 claims. I submitted those right after President Trump took office. Not that that's relevant, because it doesn't matter who's the president, the VA does what they do. All 4 were denied about 4 months later. So whenever you're going to look at a claim to see if the VA's done what they're supposed to do, the very first place to start is to look at the evidence that was submitted with your claim. It's at the beginning of all claim decisions. So when I look at this, I see that they have correspondence that I uploaded on Quick Submit on 21st January. They have a bunch of stuff that was uploaded. They went and got my medical records on the 30th. So, and then they submitted some letter to me on the 31st of January asking for more evidence. But the thing is, I had two uploads. I had uploads on the 21st and the 22nd. So as I was uploading things on the 21st of January, for some reason, partway through the upload, Quick Submit stopped working. As, by the way, I've had, I don't know how many people out there have problems sometimes with VA applications, but anyway, it just wouldn't upload any more information that day. So, I tried several more times that day. It still wouldn't accept anything. And then the next day, it finally did take the rest of the information I was submitting, right? So, but it did. Quick Submit has those documents. It verified they received those documents on the 22nd. But none of them are listed under the evidence. Okay, that's the first problem. Right? There gives you a reason to challenge this denial is that none of the evidence from the 22nd seems to have been used. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes they receive evidence, they don't list it here, and they actually used it. But it appears here that they didn't use it. But it's really hard to say. Either way, it's not listed. That gives you a reason to challenge the denial. Let's move on to the actual claims. First claims is for some contractions, Dupuytren's. And if you read the denial, and we're going to hear this repeatedly. By the way, I've already been contacted by other veterans who have this exact same denial, which was why I think it's not just me. It's probably pretty widespread because it's just odd. Here's what they say. Service connection for Dupuytren's bilateral is denied because medical evidence of record fails to show the disability has been clinically diagnosed. Okay, here's the initial diagnosis. I have a clip of it here. This was the January 21st evidence that is for sure of record. And notice it says assessment, early Dupuytren's contracture. All right, so it has been clinically diagnosed. And they have that information. So how did they deny it for such a reason? Well, let's go on to the next one, restless leg syndrome. Listen to the denial here. Restless leg syndrome bilateral is denied because the medical evidence of record fails to show the disability has been clinically diagnosed. Wow, the same reason as the last claim, right? Information that is of record, right, specifically shows on a 2024 annual physical, the VA annual physical. It has medical problems, Dupuytren's contracture, and then again, restless leg syndrome. So here on the most recent, a very recent, within a few months of filing the claim, it has two diagnoses, and it's in the record, but VA says it doesn't have them, right? That's kind of odd. Two exact same reasons when they have the information. Well, let's look at the third thing, obstructive sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea is denied because the medical evidence fails to show disability has been clinically diagnosed. Well, that's really odd because what is of record, they have this information, right? And I verified all of it. It's been uploaded. The VA's received it. It's listed as evidence. And right here, the very first thing, impression, moderate OCA or OSA, right? So, all right, 3 claims denied for the exact same reason when in fact they have all the diagnosis in front of them. Do you really think someone looked at the record to deny these claims? Or did they do as I think they have done, which is just denied the claim without looking at the evidence? Here's what they did. Well, let's look at the fourth one. This is loss of use of fees claim, and the claim doesn't mention what the loss of use is for, but either way, it says that it's denied because the condition neither occurred or was caused by service, right? But service, the feet are already service connected. This is an increased claim. So the fact that they're saying service connection is denied is just kind of crazy because it's already service connected. It's just an increased claim. And there is a statement of record that kind of goes through and explains everything. But either way, That, by the way, that statement is some of the evidence that was uploaded in the 22nd that they say they don't have. Either way, though, they should know it's already service connected and it's an increase claim. But so it looks like all four of these claims, they just didn't bother looking at anything at all, which, so what do we do about that, right? So you can file a higher level review, but the problem with that is you're going to for sure wait, 3 or 4 months. And if you ask for the informal conference, which by the way, you should always ask for, right? You can then ask the VA person if they in fact have all the evidence. In other words, the evidence that they didn't list from the 22nd, right? To see if they have it. And if they have it, great. The higher level reviewer is probably going to say, oh, they made a mistake. I'm going to send it back down and it'll revert to a supplemental claim. And they will then do what they're supposed to do, right? But let's just say they really don't have that information. Well, then you just wasted your time with the higher level review. And that's why I wouldn't ask for a higher level review. But I will say this, it's likely they have those forms. And the fastest method to correct this would be to go for the higher level review. And that will probably work. But that's not what I'm going to do. A second option is to file a supplemental claim where you could resubmit the evidence that they didn't list. But at the same time, there's kind of a problem with that because let's say they have the evidence. Well, then you don't have any new evidence to submit, right? And for a supplemental claim, you need new evidence. So one of the things I would do then is make some evidence. Can you do that? You can. For example, in this case, you can make up for theories of service connection. Actually, if there's theories the VA hasn't considered, those are in fact new evidence that you can use to bring a supplemental claim. Right? So if there's a theory that the VA hasn't already considered, again, propose that theory in a supplemental claim and they'll have to readdress the claim under that theory. It can be appealed to the board, but that would really be a stupid thing to do because the most, the VA, that's going to take, a year or two, right? And all the BVA would do is say, yeah, there's a problem and send it back to the VA to reprocess the claim. Okay, so you don't want to do that. What I'm going to do, though, is I am going to file a supplemental claim with a hearing request. Why? Because I want to verify that they indeed have the evidence in the record. And if they don't, while I'm at the hearing, I can submit that evidence right there to the person I'm having the hearing with. And any questions I have about the claim, for example, all right, you guys denied these claims because you say they don't have a diagnosis when, all right, are those diagnoses in the record because they were correctly uploaded and seem to be listed? So do you have them or don't you have them? And aren't they good enough? In other words, you can ask any questions about the evidence to make sure that things are right before you move forward. So that's what I would do because I want to get everything cleared up. The thing about asking for a hearing is it's rarely used. Most veterans have no idea that you can even ask for a hearing on a supplemental claim, but you can, right? And I think the reason the VA keeps that kind of secret is because, they don't want to conduct hearings, right? So, if you ask for a hearing, okay, a hearing is a formal process, right? They have to, get a room, right? A conference room. They have to, get ready. They have to record it. They have to then, of course, conduct the hearing. They have to swear you in. Once they record it, then they have to make a transcript, right? And all that gets entered in the record and becomes evidence, right? So they don't want to do all of that. So they keep it kind of a secret that you even have this right? So, but I want to do it because, of course, I'm going to also chew them out while I'm at it, right? Let them know, okay, did you have this evidence? Yes, we had it. Okay, well, then why didn't you use it? Is there a reason why you didn't use it? No, there won't be, so I want to hear where they're stumbling about giving me answers to the questions I have. So anyway, that's what I would do, and that's what I did. So here's what I wrote up on a supplemental claim. I wrote up my theories of service connection, which you can read them here if you like. This is the type of thing that you can do yourself, right? If you don't have any new evidence, medically speaking, you can, and you have some theories that hadn't been proposed before, you can do that for opening your supplemental claim, which is what I did. And actually request a hearing. To request a hearing is real simple. It's nothing special. There's no special form, just a plain, request on a Word document. And real simple, I request an in-person VBA hearing in reference to my supplemental claims submitted through Quick Submit on 5/8/2025. The 4 claims were for blah, 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 blah. Right? So that's what I did. Now, I did get an answer on 2 October, right, of this, right before the government shut down, right? So, and here's what they said, which is really funny, right? So they said they received my request. And the second sentence is the really interesting part. However, to request a hearing, you must submit a VA form 200996. That's a higher level review. Rather than the form you submitted, which I submitted a supplemental claim, because I want a hearing. Hearings can be done with supplemental claims, not with higher level reviews. So I'm wondering why they did that. But the worst part is they not only said I filed the wrong form and aren't going to give me my hearing, they then closed the supplemental claim. So I no longer have a supplemental claim open, so I can't have the hearing because they closed it. So I mean, right now, let's just talk about the actual regulation for hearings, right? Which surprises me that the VA would think to have a hearing, I need a higher level review. And if we read the second sentence here on the regulation, the second sentence is really interesting. It says, a hearing is not available for higher level review, which is, they say, to request a hearing, I need to submit a higher level review, right? Which is opposite from what the regulation says, right? And if you read the first sentence, which is a really cool sentence, upon request, a claimant is entitled to a hearing before the VA issues notice of decision on an initial or a supplemental claim. In other words, if you have an initial claim or a supplemental claim that's ongoing and you have questions and you want to get them answered directly from a person that you can meet with, you can ask for a hearing. That's your right. So the VA has it exactly backwards. Right? I did the exact right thing, submitting a supplemental claim and asking for a hearing, which is consistent with the regulation. Their answer is completely opposite, right, of what should have happened, which again, now it's what? Pull your hair out time, right? Because you submitted your claims, they didn't look at any evidence, at least apparently didn't look at any evidence and denied your claims. You submitted a supplemental claim, asking for a hearing at the same time, which they then close the claim and don't give you your hearing, right? Yeah, it's time to pull your hair out, right? So what can you do now, right? Well, you can contract your senators, right? Your senators or your congressman, right? Or congressperson, right? And you can have them file an inquiry, explain all these things to your congressmen or senators, and hopefully they can get it cleared up with a congressional inquiry. The VA, I think, only has a couple of weeks to actually process an inquiry once your representative sends it to them. So you might not have to wait months and months to get an answer. Or you can actually go to your local regional office and just go right up to customer service desk and bring all your information and say, hey, what the hell's going on? Right? Or you can, now they have these virtual appointments. And you can do the same thing. You will be able to talk to someone at the VA and ask them what the hell's going on. So I actually did that. And I actually had the Vera phone call today, which was really interesting, right? The person I talked to gave me a very good summary of what went on. You filed these claims, we denied it, you submitted a supplemental claim with a hearing request. Okay, but you submitted the wrong form. So, my answer is, okay, you need to submit a higher level review so you can have your hearing. And I said, okay, thank you for that information. You gave a real good summary, but you're not right. I mean, you're kind of wrong I actually did all the right things. He says, well, no, to have a hearing, you have to have this higher level review filed. And I'm like, okay, do you have access to the VA regulations? And he said, I do. And I said, well, go to, 3.103 and, let's go to paragraph D and let's read those first 2 sentences. And I had him do that, right? So, he went back and read those first 2 sentences. And after that point, he was completely like, stuttering. Right? So he said, okay. I said, well, okay, the answer to what to do is real easy. You need to reopen the supplemental claim and schedule my hearing. So, well, let me call you back. I need to go speak to some people. And I'm like, okay. So they did call me back a couple hours later. And he said, okay, they reopened the supplemental claim, right? Which is good. And he said, I should hear something. It should go to some regional office. I said, okay, listen, the hearing needs to be conducted at this regional office, the one in my state, you guys. So you guys need to schedule the hearing. Right? I get it. You put the supplemental claim back active, you still have to schedule the hearing. That's the problem so far. So are you going to do that? Well, yeah, I imagine we will get around to that. I'm like, okay, so I guess I'll just wait to hear something. So will the VA get back to? Do you wonder at all why some veterans get to a point where they're so frustrated, at least with the claim process? And let me tell you, some of the same things go on with VA healthcare. I've been jerked around multiple times in VA healthcare with, who knows what the hell's going on. Right? So the thing is, with veterans who may be at risk for suicide, regardless of what type of, the VA, they'll say someone's at, low risk of suicide. Well, you can never know that, right? Just like Paul in this video, we don't know what level of risk was assigned, even though I suspect it was a low risk was assigned to Paul because he was doing so well. But, you don't know which veteran is standing at the edge of that cliff, right? And just one little nudge, and that could push him right over, right? That's all it takes. Like, for instance, with Paul, he gets his decision in the mail. He was probably hoping to get that 100% rating, probably needing to get it. Who knows what financial condition his life was in at the time. But certainly what he probably needed was that 100% rating. And he likely had it coming. But what does he get in the mail? Probably a VA decision riddled with errors that pushed him over the edge, right? I don't want to see that happen to other veterans. So so what do we do? All I got to say is, us veterans need to take more action to put pressure on our senators, our congresspeople, the VA committees. The suggestions I have here on this video for addressing veteran suicide, I hope some of you veterans out there will send those suggestions to the Veteran Affairs committees, your senators, because if the study that I read was right about as many as 44 veterans a day are dying from suicide, even if it's only 18 a day, we need to do more. Anyway, so that's all I got to say, except any veterans out there want me to look at their claims and do an analysis and figure out what should be done, just contact me and we'll make a video. All right, Irate Veteran, out.